Welcome to the Point of Convergence podcast. I am your host, Grant Lira. Get ready to sit down, tune in, and implement. Remember, the knowledge you learn here and anywhere else in your life is only worth something to you if you use it. So get implementing after this episode and enjoy. All right, welcome back to another episode of Point of Convergence. Today, we are joined by Jeff Bajorek here. Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, brother. I was fantastic.
I was afraid that I bored you before we even started. You have this thing where you yawn before you press record. And I was like, man, I didn't even start talking yet. Like, is this how this is going to go, Grant?
Jeff is one of the people now who's seen one of my weird quirks of myself. Every time I start a recording, Loom, Zoom, whatever the case is, I yawn before I do it. My mind's like, I think my mind tells me to do it, so I don't do it during the recording. And now I'm thinking about it again. So hopefully that doesn't come back out.
Yawning is one of those things that's actually contagious. So if you see a picture of someone yawning, or like I remember reading about this in school, I was in elementary school, the stuff that sticks in my brain, Grant, I don't know why, but it sticks in my brain. And I remember there was this little kind of piece in one of the Scholastic Readers thing. And there was this picture of this big male lion in the African savannah, just this big wide open mouth yawn, right? And it's like, and it said something like, 60% of you are yawning right now because you saw this picture, and yawning is contagious because there's something about the feedback loop, and yawning is just your body trying to get more oxygen. It's trying to take a big gulp of oxygen. So people will yawn sometimes if they're really tired after a workout or whatever, when panting just isn't enough. So it's interesting. It doesn't mean that you're sleepy. It means that your body needs more oxygen. So anyway, that's my fun fact for the day.
I like that. If you're working hard. If you're working hard throughout the day, you got to get that yawn and get yourself refueled. But Jeff, dude, I'm actually pumped to have you on the podcast today because we had a meeting before this talking a little bit about what you do. But for the people at home who may not, have the pleasure of being introduced to you yet, please give us a rundown of, exactly what it is you do, what your scope of expertise is. I know they're excited to hear it.
I help salespeople. I help sales teams quite frankly, feel better about selling. And that's a strange way to think about it. But I really believe that when you understand how to sell, or when you understand what selling is, you can make your own sales process your own. And that's the key. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing is they want the latest, greatest tips, tricks. What line do I use to get my email returned? How do I leave a voicemail message? What do I say? Just tell me what to do. And it's like, no, I can tell you what needs to be done. And when I tell you what needs to be done, you can make it your own. When you make it your own, you're going to do it better. And when you do it better, you're going to have more success. And when you're feeling like you have some ownership over it, you're actually more likely to do it. You have more fun doing it. It's more fulfilling to do it. Now you take something that is more effective because you're doing it better, and you actually feel better about doing it. You do it more often. That's exponential growth, Grant. So, there are a lot of people out there who will give you those tips and tricks and tactics. But my whole thing is, you can't sell like me. You got to sell like you. You can try to sell like me, and you're not going to do that well with it. But when you understand why I do what I do, and then you take those principles, those concepts, you make them your own, well, now you're dangerous in the best way possible. So that's what I do. And I do that for teams. I do that for individuals. I do that. I do keynote speeches and things. I've got a couple of podcasts. I've written a couple of little books. I mean, you can find me out there, but that's how I help people.
And if there's one thing to take away from this entire episode so far, and I know we just got into it, but I feel like this is going to be a pivotal kind of point that we hover around this podcast, is sell like yourself. And Jeff said it, like, sell like yourself. You can't sell like Jeff. You can't sell like me. We can't sell like you. Like, everybody has their own style. And once you step into that and truly realize like how powerful becoming yourself, as cheesy as it sounds, but like being yourself and figuring out what works and what doesn't work for you, that's when you start to see that exponential growth. Because you can definitely go in and you can definitely learn like some of the, sales tips, tricks, secrets, tactics, whatever you want to call them, and they can add to your toolbox, but that's not going to be what makes you, an awesome salesperson. What's going to make you an awesome salesperson is being comfortable in your your skills and knowing what's powerful for you, knowing what you're comfortable doing, and then transferring that confidence to other people. Like that's what it's all about. And it obviously makes it a lot better if you believe in what you're selling. You know, there's a lot of people out there who, if you run your own business, you have a program or a package that maybe you don't, you know, it's not the best value, whatever the case is. Like one of the things, and this is, I think, a massive part of sales and Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, brother, but I think that you can have a awesome salesperson, like grade A closer, with a horrible offer, and that awesome closer will think that they're a bad salesperson. Then you flip the script on that. You have a horrible sales guy, like brand new, maybe, with an amazing offer. And I mean, that's just going to grow much better. I think a lot of it too comes down to your offer and like how value driven that offer is.
Mm. I'll take it a step further. I don't think it has anything to do with the offer. I think it has everything to do with what you said earlier, which is the seller's belief in their offer. There's no such thing as a bad offer. If someone thinks it's valuable enough to pay for it, it's a good offer. Okay. So chances are your offer, maybe you don't like it, but it's a good offer for somebody. So you either got to get your head wrapped around your offer and your belief in what you sell people and how you help people. Same thing, by the way. Or you got to find a different place to sell where you can have that belief. So the thing that makes that great seller a great closer, as you said, is their belief that they can close, their belief that they're helping people, their belief that there is value in that offer. There's no such thing as a great closer with a bad offer. Okay. That in a successful position, right? I mean, like if that's the case and it's just really not an offer they can believe in, then they're not any less of a closer or a seller. They're in the wrong spot. They're in a bad fit, right? So there are a lot of things that and I think therein lies the construct that we're all fighting against. It was, well, if you can sell anything. Yes and no. You can sell anything, asterisk, provided that you believe in it, you feel good about what you're doing for people, and you're willing to do the work. Right?
Exactly. And like, no, that's so true though. Like what you said definitely holds validity because you have that belief. And like all sales really boils down to is like the transfer of beliefs, right? It's like you transferring your confidence that something work into somebody else where you guys enter business together. And seeing that is like for someone like you or me who has been, in X industry for a long time. You've obviously been in a little bit longer than I have, but
hey.
You and me have both seen what we do and what like the change in reality makes for people's lives. Now, Jeff, for somebody who's starting their business, who maybe doesn't have a single client, right? That first sale, they don't know. They know on paper, like, well, if I do all these things, this person's life will be so much better, right? They'll make all this money, they'll close all these deals, whatever the case is, but they've never seen that play out. What advice do you give them to have that, like, that unbreakable, like, confidence that this is what they should be providing people? And if somebody gets off that call with them, they've done a disservice by not having, business done together.
You put this on a tee for me. It's like you've done this before. There's an exercise that I go through with people at the beginning of every engagement. And it's an episode it's branded roughly with my podcast, The Why and the Buy. It's what is your why? And why do you believe in your company? Why do you believe in the products, services you offer? Why do you believe in yourself? Why do you believe your customer is better off for having done business with you? Right? And why do your best customers buy from you? Now, if you can't answer that last one because you don't have any customers, okay, you're just getting started here. That's fine. Start with those first four. And I borrowed those. I did a lot of work with Jeffrey Gitomer when I started my career and the king of sales. And the guy's just a legend. And he's run through, and I actually licensed some of his material to get started. That's how our relationship started. And like those questions are really, really powerful. And that's where you go when the chips are down. That's where you go when things aren't going real well. And that's where you go when you're just getting started. Like, why did you start your business? Like, just because you haven't seen the deal close yet doesn't mean that it's not going to. It doesn't mean that, it can't be done. So you don't have the benefit of having that victory to lean back on. Okay, so go back to why you started this in the first place. What is your purpose? If you're starting a business, it's because like you feel really passionate about what this business will be able to do for other people and thus what it will be able to do for you. So instill that. And the key is not just to answer those questions. The key is to go back and revisit the answers. The key is to remember that selling is, as Brian Tracy put it, a transfer of enthusiasm from one party to another. That was in The Psychology of Selling, one of the first audiobooks that I ever listened to on sales. And I love that definition. And it underscores the need for belief. And so, okay, Grant, you started this company. Why do you believe that this company is the right the right mechanism, the right vehicle for you to help other people achieve what they want to achieve so that you can achieve what you want to achieve? Why do you believe that the service you offer is is so great? Again, why do you believe that you're able to do these kind of things? And if you own the company, then you and the company kind of feel like the same entity there. But if you, and this is kind of the lens that I bring on top of those Gittimer questions, is how is it all differentiated? Right. And I wrote in the 5 Forgotten Fundamentals of Prospecting. If you cannot differentiate, you cannot sell. So what you're offering out there is probably already offered by somebody else. And even if it's a revolutionary product or service, it's replacing something that's already being used or done. So how is it different? And then what do those differentiators do? What's the value of those differentiators do? And then what is the outcome that your client, your customer can expect as a result of what you're offering? And when you think about the way the world changes for your client because of what you bring to the table, well, that just further underscores that belief. And pick up the phone, make the calls, knock on the doors, whatever you need to do. You should have enough momentum based on the fire in your belly to go make those first couple of sales, even if you haven't made them yet. Someone's going to be first. Who gets to be first? That's the way I think you should approach it.
And that, I mean, that's amazing because like it's so powerful if you don't have those external reinforcements yet of somebody going forward with your system, your product, your service, whatever it is, they're life changing. Rely on your own internals. Like, that what you're offering is something that will change people's lives. And Jeff put it in like one of the best ways. Who gets to be that first person? Who has the opportunity to be that first person? And once that first person happens for you, I mean, you'll get hooked on the feeling. It's a pretty great feeling to see people succeed, benefit from, make whatever the case is for your product or service. It's amazing. And within that too, it's not going to be like smooth sailing in the beginning. There's going to be a lot of learning curves. And I'll have to look up exactly who said this. I can't remember. I know it's a very successful entrepreneur, but success is basically measured by how many times you can hear no and keep going. Because like, I'm sure Jeff's heard no a shitload of times in his life. I know I have heard no a shitload of times in my life. And it's all about like, we think about it like this here. Like, it's like, okay, I heard no, this deal didn't close. We didn't get this, whatever the case is. Awesome. That's fantastic. That means we're this much closer. We just checked another no off our list to, whatever our goal is. Like, get excited to hear no, but don't give up. Don't give up just because you hear no. Like, that's a big difference, right? Excited for that no, because that in some ways you got to check those no's off because they will happen before you hear a yes. But also, keep on, stay on top of it, like offering those creative solutions and like stuff for people that would make way more sense for their situation helps out a ton too. Like, no, people aren't going to all fit into one cookie cutter, package that you sell or service that you sell. You got to, have a little bit of leeway there, but hearing those no's is a blessing because it means you get to hear no, right? This is your journey. Like, you get that and you get closer.
And it's a big deal. A friend of mine, a couple of friends of mine, actually, Andrea Waltz and Richard Fenton wrote a great little book. It's about 78 pages long. It's a really nice parable. It's called Go for No. And it's about overcoming your fear of rejection, particularly in sales. And it's got applications outside of sales too, but it's an awesome little book. And the idea is not just that you are going to hear no, so get used to it. It's not just, okay, let's try to embrace the fact that we're going to hear no. It's like, what are the opportunities that hearing no brings up? Right. And I don't like the whole, oh no, it's just a not yet. And if I know that the average person has to, say no 6 times before they're going to say yes, then I'm just going to ask them. I'm just going to call them 6 times in a row, and they get like, it doesn't work that way, right? Like, you have to think about why they said no. You have to think about if they said no at all, or if they were just trying to brush you away and you never had their attention in the first place. Like, my take on rejection is a little contrarian, but like, what are you trying to do with this? Are you learning from the no's you get, right? The only time a sales call is a failure is when you don't learn on something that's going to make you better prepared for the next call. So are you adaptable enough? And, I think I like that you define success in how many no's you're able to tolerate, or how many no's are you willing to tolerate. But I think, for the longest time, we've had this idea that success is a mountain you climb, and when you get to the top, you win. Um, there's always that bigger mountain.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
the mountain never really has a summit. You're not going to get to the top, because what you find is what you thought was the top. As soon as you get there, you realize you can go further. So you can't, you have to stop judging success by how close you are to what you think is the top. You have to turn around every once in a while and look at how far you've climbed. You can just measure how far you've come. And that's one of the things that I work on with people, is this thing that I call swagger. I'm not the only one who calls it swagger. We know what this is. And it's just this idea that I'm going to keep doing this because it's worth it. That there is an opportunity in every obstacle, that I'm better off for having learned these lessons. And that if I realize how much better I am now versus when I started, and then I think about how much better I will be if I keep going, now it's like, oh, you're okay. Yeah, we got to go. We got to keep doing this. It's worth it. The trip is worth it. And if everything was a win, you'd get bored. If everything was a loss, you'd be demoralized. So the peaks and the valleys are there to provide perspective that there's always something else coming. And it's really easy to learn lessons from losses. Can you learn lessons from wins? And when you keep those things in perspective, that's how you're able to climb more mountains and more quickly.
And I got chills when you said that, because I think so many people get caught up in exactly what you said when they, that tip of the mountain's an illusion. It doesn't ever
Mm,
truly get
it's a
closer.
mirage. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. But what's not a mirage, and what is like static and not changing, is how far you've come. So like there is a measurable distance there, right? Like take a second, if you feel like you're spinning your wheels, if you feel like you're not making much progress, like pause, take a breath, turn around and see where you were a year ago, a month ago,
Hmm.
2 years, whatever the time lapse is there from today. Like the progress you made is so motivating, because you see, and you can even, like, if you record calls, if you record other stuff you do, go back and listen to one of those, like just see like
Hmm.
where you were then to where you are now, because that's an amazing way to put things into perspective and really boost up that confidence, so you can help more people, so you can instill that confidence into more people, so you can help, their businesses, their personal life, their personal goals, whatever the case is. Like, that's
Hmm.
fire. That's it. That's the secret, dude. If you want to call it a
Yeah.
secret.
Yeah. I mean, you have to stop every once in a while. Look, you play golf, Grant?
um I play
Not
golf,
really.
not too good at it.
Okay.
I
Well,
by the very basic definition, yes, I play golf.
okay. Do you own golf clubs?
I do.
Okay. All right. Then you're serious enough. There was a time when there was a time when I started playing golf where I wasn't very good. And to just tap into, or give an example of, kind of looking back, the first couple times out, I mean, I'm like, I stopped counting, right? You pick up your ball after you swing at it so many times and it doesn't move. But I was hooked, and I really wanted to get better at it. So I'm actually very similar to selling in this regard. I wasn't very good at it, but I wanted to get better at it. So you study, you learn, you practice, you rinse and repeat. And last weekend, as we're recording this, last weekend there was a little event at my club, and I was playing. It was a member event, so I was playing with a good buddy of mine. And the rain, like the thing had already been rescheduled once, and it was just rainy the same day, and when it was rescheduled, and we were having a hard time. When your course is waterlogged, like everything has to be more precise, right? And we get out there and we're like, we are clearly not winning this tournament because we are hacking it around. Anyway, find a way to salvage what feels like real golf now, right? I've been playing 15 some years, and total up the scorecard at the end of the day. And I'm like, man, this wasn't that good. So I get 87 at the end. It's respectable, but not something that I'm proud of. And then I thought back to how long it took me to break 100 on an 18-hole round, and how it wasn't that long ago that I'd have come home dancing if I shot an 87. And then here I am some years later, knowing that I've been south of 80 a lot more often. And it's like, yeah, it feels like it wasn't anywhere close to my best, but it certainly wasn't the worst I've ever played. And while I'm disappointed now, and there's some motivation behind being disappointed with your finish, you have to still have the perspective of, you know what? You know how many people never break 90? You know how many people, there's just that sobering perspective that you need to remind yourself of every once in a while. And I think we get caught up, and I saw this, and I don't recall the woman's name, and this is bad because I should actually look her up and send her a note, because it was something on LinkedIn. It was a post from a podcast, actually a video, kind of like what this one is. And it was, this woman said, we have to be our own biggest critic, but we also have to be our own biggest cheerleader, and in equal amounts. And I was like, oh, that's the second half that I miss. That is the second half that most people miss. And we're in this hustle culture, Grant, where it's like, go, 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 make that money, stack that paper, collect those checks, do what you get. You got to hustle. You got to grind. You got to want it. You got to need it. You got to live it, baby. Right. And it's like, hold on. It's easy to use that motivation to grind yourself into a pulp when you're not as good as you want to be. But you have to turn around, and you have to remember that you're way better than you were a couple of days ago, and you're only half as good as you're ever going to be too, right? So where's that perspective shift? Because if you get kicked in the ass enough times, you're still getting kicked, right? Who's lifting you up? And you've got to do that for yourself, because if you're not willing to do it for yourself, you can't expect anybody else to.
And that's just it, right? Like looking further from that, even like you were ecstatic to be able to shoot, under 100 at one point in your life. Now think about this too. How many people like in the world don't have arms? They can't golf. Like there's always something to be like grateful for. There's always something, like, even if you think you're having this horrible day, and like you said, a lot of that grind culture, like Instagram motivation stuff, like that will get you to the point where you're like constantly comparing yourself to others, and not because people don't see so much of what goes on behind the scenes. And this is one of the things about Instagram that I really can't stand, is there's such like there's these like influencers, these grind culture people, and they're renting cars, they're renting houses, they're doing all this stuff, making you think they're very successful. Little piece of information, most of them are selling courses, and they want to sell you those courses so you can have their lifestyle that they show you on Instagram. And I'm sure a lot of people know this isn't news, but I feel like in the back of people's heads subconsciously that does resonate with them. They want that stuff. And it's like comparing yourself to others is never going to be what gets you to success. Now, competition's awesome. If you're somebody like me who really likes competition, then it's cool. You can make a competition out of it. Even in your own organization, like we have fun competitions here, but we're all still playing for the same team. So even when you lose, you win, right? It's kind of like that deal. So it's interesting, right? Perspective is so important within growth. If you don't have perspective and you're always just looking at yourself within that like microscope and that tunnel, that you can get caught in a pretty dangerous loop there of just like working nonstop, not thinking you're making progress. And then eventually that will turn into a reality, and you'll just get like roadblocked and not really be able to go anywhere because you're so caught up in your own head. And Jeff, I'll change the topic a little bit here. So
sure.
I'm curious to know this, and I know a lot of our listeners are too. You briefly mentioned it before. When you first got into sales, you said you weren't great at it, and it's something
Nope.
like golf you wanted to improve at. So like, where was your first step? Did you seek guidance from someone who was better? Did you go read? Like, what did you do to improve?
Yes. I sought out senior people in the organization. I mean, someone sold me on selling, right? I came from a clinical medical background and, was was working in sports medicine and then got into selling sports medicine equipment. And basically on just kind of a flippant kind of opportunity. I was looking for a job and one came along and it was a little non-traditional. But I said, you know what, I can do this for a year if I hate it. And I'm not expecting to like it, but man, let's give it a shot. If I hate it after a year, I can go back to working in a hospital or for a hospital rather. So I was good at that. And I looked at other senior people in the organization. I looked at my manager who hired me, and I'm like, help me here because I'm a reluctant salesperson. I was not, uh, selling was something you did to somebody. It was a dirty kind of thing. And so to get my brain wrapped around the concept that it wasn't was one thing, but then to be immersed in it was another. And I told myself that, like I said, I'll give it a year. And if I hate it, I'll leave. And I made it about 10 and a half months. And I was like, yeah, it might be time to start looking. It's getting to be summer again. Let's start looking at, maybe getting back into clinical athletic medicine. And finally, we had someone who joined the organization who had a lot of experience and was able to take me under his wing and kind of show me the ropes and not just show me how he did it, but why he did it. And then look, I'm a smart enough guy, never the smartest person in the room when there's anybody else in it. But when, like I'm smart enough to pick things up. And as I started to see that there were these fundamentals at play here. You have to have your prospects' attention if you're going to sell them something, right? You have to put yourself in front of people who can benefit from your project, right? Or from your product. It doesn't matter if it's by the phone or by email or by social media or by carrier pigeon or smoke signal or two-way pager or whatever it is. Like, I don't care how you do it. Like, people arguing social media versus the phone, long live the phone is dead. Like, who cares? Like, how many people out there buying stuff, like billions of dollars in the economy, who don't exist on Instagram or LinkedIn? Like, just let that sink in, right? There's more than one way to do it. Anyway, what are we trying to do here? Now let's figure out the best way for me to do that. And so then I sought more resources, but I never sought the books. I never sought the podcasts. I never sought the people who were just selling silver bullets, who were just selling the courses, who were just like your Instagram influencers, like you're talking about. I sought the people who could give me some insight into why stuff worked. Then and I have a fairly mathematical engineering minded kind of brain. I like seeing how stuff gets pieced together and put together. So when I can see how things work, I can make it my own. I can pull a little more on this lever with this customer. I can pull a little more on this lever over here with another customer because I need to be adaptable. When you just sell one, if you're just a one trick pony, you're not going to be very successful. And if you just know a couple of quick tips that you pulled off of social media and you think you're going to make them work, like that's not how selling works. It's an understanding of how people react in certain situations, how they make their decisions, all the things. Like, that's why empathy is so important, because you have to consider all these other factors that you're not aware of in many cases. I don't want to rant or ramble too far here, but when I've always sought out those resources, the authors, the podcast hosts, the colleagues now who really understand the X's and O's and what's going on behind the scenes. And that, I think that's been the biggest help for me.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Because I know personally the biggest help for us was mentorship in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
finding mentors. And, like for us, we didn't have an organization, right? Like we started stuff. So funny enough, I'm talking about, the Instagram space, but our mentors, like a lot of them we found off of Instagram. Now, these people obviously very credible. They're not like the people we were
Sure.
talking about before.
Right.
And I will say this too: there are some fantastic courses out there. I've
That's not what
taken a
this is
few.
about. Right. Yeah.
Yep, I've taken a few, and I really like them. There's some not so great ones, but beyond that, finding those mentors out there, the internet is such an amazing place for that because you can connect with people from anywhere. You don't need proximity. You have that virtual proximity to people. So having somebody on the other side of the US, the other side of the world, who is where you want to be at the end, mentoring you, I mean, that's an amazing opportunity.
Mhm.
And now something else you said too that I do want to touch on more is having this like one trick pony mentality, because I see this happen so much with people who are starting their companies or even more like medium level, they're starting to scale, they have some employees now, they're growing. Um, Scripts, like I have a love-hate relationship with scripts, and I'm really interested to hear your input because in my world, scripts are something that everybody starts with. It's something
Mhm.
to like give you a fallback or a crutch because you are learning, you're new, and you need some direction. But I feel like sometimes you listen back to calls, whether you're mentoring someone yourself or whether you're, in a mentorship group and listening to calls together, and you can tell that like huge chunks of like, whether it be rapport or just like discovery, are being neglected because it doesn't follow the script or it doesn't like stick to what's on the paper. And talk about missed opportunity cost. And that could be the difference of you pitching somebody and you like not truly understanding why this person needs what you're selling, why this person might not even be a good fit. If they're
Mhm.
not a good fit, then you don't need to sell to them. But like there's so much within that in my mind where scripts are amazing to start, but then like as you go forward, adapt that, memorize parts that you enjoy, like intro, like always something good. I almost always say pretty much the same stuff when I get introduced to somebody,
Sure.
but it's more of like do you remember those choose your own adventure books or
I
like
do.
you make a choice and you go to a different page?
I'm
It
not as old as you think, Grant, okay?
it's like that. It's like that in my mind. Now I'll stop rambling because I know that everyone wants to hear your take on this. So I'll pass the mic.
No, you're onto something there. The scripts are important because they hit the main ideas, then the main aspects of the thing that you're trying to sell. So that's important. But man, someone else wrote those. You didn't write them. Even if you did write them, do you want to say the same thing verbatim 100 times a day, 50 times a day, even 20 times a day? No. And this is the thing too, is I've written my own scripts before. And then I've been the guy in the car, in the parking lot before I go into that meeting, reciting them, trying to memorize them. And you know what's interesting is if you just try to memorize it and then you say it out loud and you practice like 10 times, you end up going from the way you write to the way you speak, which is always more fluid. There aren't enough people out there who write the way they speak. And particularly when it's something important, like this is my rehearsal for my big meeting, you're going to use big words that are actually they make you sound smart when someone reads them, but they're really hard for you to say, which is why most people don't say them. So these scripts, they're your talking points. But even then, tell me, Grant, good sales call. Tell me about a good sales call that you had that you knew exactly what you were going to say in exactly what order, and you knew exactly how they were going to respond. So you had a planned response. Like people don't talk like that. And so all of a sudden you're trying to cram a conversation into a small period of time with an agenda of things that you have to get to in this small period of time. And you're going to make that feel natural. It's not how it works. But that's the build that you're sold when it's like you too can be in sales and you can just build a program and you can buy ads on social media that will pay for this and you sell two courses and it'll pay. Like you're being sold this idea that doesn't play out in reality very often. Not that it can't, and it certainly does a few times because that's how you'll have enough testimonials to get it to work. Like I don't believe that everybody out there is a scam artist. But you have to remember that people don't converse like that. People don't interact like that. You have a conversation, you let it breathe. You have a point, you have an agenda, you have certainly some mutually agreed upon outcomes of this conversation, but who knows where it's going to go? And if it goes totally sideways, maybe that's a lot of fun and it's a reason to have another sales call in a couple of days. That's not the worst thing to ever happen. But salespeople who aren't comfortable enough in their own skin, they're not confident enough in what they do that they can recover if things don't go exactly the way they pre-scripted it. If they're afraid of what happens if a conversation goes off the rails, those aren't very good salespeople.
You're absolutely right. And I feel like in the beginning, that fear is much more real. And, the next step is kind of like confronting that, facing that head on, like having to think on the fly, like knowing your product or service inside and out. And, to me, the next natural step from like a script in the beginning, because I realized pretty quickly that it's good for like the first maybe third or fourth of the call, because you can kind of like get in there and then open the floor up. They got questions and stuff, but like talking points, bullet points, that stuff's even better because you can like literally just glance. If you're like space out during a call, literally just look over and oh, okay, I haven't talked about this yet, or I haven't asked them this, stuff like that. But Jeff, I know that you got to get rolling here. So last thing I'll kind of end it with, where can we learn more about you? Where can we check you out? Where can we see your books, buy your books? Give us the plug.
JeffBajorek.com is my home base on the internet. There are links to everything there, but where I'm really hanging out more often is actually at rethinkthewayyouSell.com. It's a community that I'm building. Got several hundred people in there. We do some fun stuff. There's some monthly networking and things like that among the community. We're just really trying to create an environment where people who want to get better can meet and help each other, right? And social media networks have an agenda. They should have an agenda. There's nothing wrong with that agenda, but that is not always the place you want to go when you want to have a real connection with somebody. Not that it can't happen, but this is a container, a space, a place where people can really learn and grow together. So rethinkthewayyouSell.com, it's free. There are some premium aspects of that you can choose to go down if you want to, and that's plenty fine. But I'm happy enough just having you pop in, say hello, answer a question every once in a while, and maybe engage with the group. So that's probably the best place for me to send you.
Rock and roll. Well, Jeff, guys, as always, that's going to be down below. So check that out in the description. Blessing to have you on today, brother. There was some knowledge dropped throughout this call, so I'm pumped that we're able to deliver that to people hungry to learn.
Cool. I appreciate it. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention too, when you're listening to this on a podcast player, if you will go search on that podcast player for Deeper Thought, that is where I am kind of distilling what makes a top performer in sales. And so you're going to get some of the mindset, you're going to get some of the non-traditional approaches, you're going to get about some of the other resources that people are seeking to pursue this as a craft, not just a job, certainly not just a profession. And it's a premium subscription podcast, but there's always a couple of free episodes, and we rotate those episodes out every once in a while, so you can get a lot of that content for free. But I think it's worth paying for too, Grant. So that's why I do it. But we're out there. It's easy to find me, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you.
Guys, if you liked what you heard today, go check that out, because more of the same. I'm sure some heavy hitting bombs in that one as well. Jeff, I appreciate you for letting us take up some of your calendar space today, brother.
Thanks, Grant. I appreciate you having me on. This was really good.